This man is a visionary at a scale I've never seen before, and it is an honor to introduce him today and welcome him to moderate this incredible panel for us. Shuja, take it away.
Thank you, Arun. Don't believe half the stuff that he said, but I'm Shuja Keen. I'm a managing director at TRG, and I don't know, I'm hearing, can you guys hear me okay? Okay, cool. So I'm going to start the round of introductions very quickly, but over the last 20 years, I've spent my career in taking processes which were well-defined, good training materials, and leveraging low-cost markets to improve the EBITDAs of our portfolio companies or provide better quality customer service from remote locations. But today, if you have well-defined processes, good training materials, you can automate and use AI for that. So particularly excited about this particular panel. And we have a really amazing group over here. Starting all the way on my left is Caroline O'Brien. She's the Chief Data Officer and Head of Product at Afiniti. We've got Jesse Zhang, who's the founder and CEO of Decagon. And then you've got Fawad Ahmad, who's the Chief Digital Officer and Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at State Farm. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to do a quick introduction. You guys got to say, one fun fact about each of you. So over to you, Caroline.
Okay, great. I'm a...
Something not on your LinkedIn profile.
Not on my LinkedIn profile. Okay. I'm a data scientist, but before I was in AI, I actually was in aerospace. And when I was 22, I launched a ramjet, which successfully traveled Mach 2, which was considered a successful flight. But importantly, before we did that flight test, we ran a branch of engineering is called computational fluid dynamics, and we were simulating every aspect of that flight using massive computer models, and that kind of set up the foundation for me going into AI and in first healthcare and now customer experience.
Excellent. Jesse.
Great. Hey, everyone. I'll do a quick intro first, then my fun fact. So quick intro, I'm one of the founders and the CEO here at Decagon. My background, I originally studied AI for undergrad at Harvard, not MIT, so thanks for inviting me. And after that, I started my first company. It was acquired by Google. This is the second company. And specifically what we do is we build AI customer support agents for large companies, right? So fun fact for me, when I was growing up, I did a lot of math contests, and what those are is you just get a bunch of kids, you put them in a room, and you give them math problems to solve, and the person that solves the most in the given amount of time wins. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Fawad. I lead strategy and transformation work on behalf of State Farm, which was a startup 102 years ago. We join sessions like this so we can keep that mindset. Fun fact, on December 13th, which is Friday the 13th, I should take my private pilot check ride. So I've been pursuing that for a couple of years during my spare time, and hopefully we'll get my wings December 13th.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. I guess you know how to value risk there, right? So you guys have all heard about AI disrupting the customer support industry, and there's a lot of AI innovations happening, throughout, every day you're hearing about new things coming out. So we're going to go around the panel over here, and let's start off with Caroline. So what's some recent AI developments and customer experience that have been promising, and you've seen some pilot implementations around those?
Sure. So, first I should give a little intro about where I come from. My company, Afiniti, we sell contact center AI solutions into very large enterprises throughout the world. We've been around for about 15 years, and so our clients include AT&T, Verizon, United Health Group, in Sky, Virgin Media, LG Plus in South Korea. And I think what we've seen for us, we have an optimization technology. So as our technology, we've been able to apply and add a huge amount of value through pairing and optimizing various decisions in the customer journey to both improve costs or reduce the cost and increase revenue. But I think in the last 3 or 4 years, we've just seen this huge uptake as well in the contact center AI technology space. Broadly, you've got your automation type technologies, so things like post-call summarization, which has been really powerful. That's been able to automate call summaries. In terms of improvements around 3 to 10% reduction in handle time, so quite meaty use cases there. I'd say that kind of table stakes technology. You've got now kind of co-pilots, which have been really useful, being rolled out through a series of pilots through large enterprises right now. That's where you're getting transcription, sentiment tracking, intelligent prompts for the agents. They've been quite successful. The newer ones as well that I think have been pretty exciting around multimodal AI. So this is where you're using text, imaging, voice data, all to drive better experiences. So like a customer could send in a photo of their defected product, and AI would troubleshoot and kind of walk them through that process. That's been, I've seen that in small pilots, but kind of meaty ones as well in terms of value creation. I think we'll start to see those scale in the next little while.
Cool. Excellent. Fawad, I know you've been doing a bunch of pilots. We'd love to hear what's working.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just a little bit of context. So hopefully people don't have, a catastrophe occur as we saw with Helene and Milton. But I was recently reminded, I went to Augusta, Georgia, and the devastation is unbelievable when you see trees and debris stacked up where you can't even see the roads anymore. So what we try to do is quite essential, I would say, after healthcare, maybe quite important for us to be operating efficiently. And part of what we do is try to make sure that our workforce is really amplified in their ability to accurately and quickly take care of those kinds of problems, or the employees who are trying to actually solve those problems. So it's always rooted in how does this impact the customer. And I think the recent pilot, Shuja, around, we have to talk about generative AI. We've got our contact center environment. And over there, we've got obviously large knowledge repositories, and we have a lot of churn in our workforce. So people come in and out, and yet it can take up to a year to train people. And so think about that time, and they're not efficient and they're not productive. So we're actually using generative to actually look into the knowledge databases and actually, while someone's chatting with them in real time, pull up a response on their behalf that's quite useful, even with, here's step 1, 2, and 3. And then begin on certain limited topics around questions around their bill or questions around their coverage or all the various things you might have as a customer. And so we're seeing incredible satisfaction, of course, from the employees who have that technology. And their question is, can you have it cover more topics? Can it help me in more ways? Because I'm with a real person right now who has a real problem. So we're seeing success there, and we're scaling that. It started with a couple of people, and now it's a few dozen people. And our goal is to actually go beyond that. But it's quite exciting if you think about, we get to do what we do, but just do it in a better way.
Yeah, be a better neighbor. Yeah. So, Jesse, there's been an explosion in AI being applied in customer service, and that's like, when people talk about the use case, like customer service is the first one. There have been an emergence of a lot of companies, very well funded. What made you jump into this space?
Yeah, good question. So the use case that we care about a lot is very simple, which is you're building full agent systems that can do everything that a human agent would be able to do. So that's replying to customers, looking up data, taking actions, analyzing conversations and stuff like that. So the main value that people get is, you're basically able to save a ton of money because you don't need as many human agents anymore, and you're giving people a better customer experience, right? So it's awesome. It'd be awesome if you could give every single one of your customers like a Four Seasons level experience. So those are the two goals. To your point, in kind of AI space, the customer support, customer experience use case it's like kind of like the first golden use case that people are adopting because it's so tailor-made for LLMs. For us, the reason why we've kind of been the fastest growing company in this new generation is there's basically two axes that every customer evaluates people on. The first is what's like the accuracy and the quality of the answers. I think the agents we built are really sort of optimized for that. Like you have guardrails in place. The answers are super personalized. It feels very human-like. And the second piece is people really care about AI systems not being black boxes, right? Like no one wants to adopt an AI system. It's like, okay, what's it doing? How's it making decisions? How can I control its logic? And so I think those two items are the sort of top of mind for us, and that's what's allowed us to grow very quickly in this new generation.
Yeah. So the goal is to replace all the humans there, eventually.
Most, yeah.
That's good. That's good. So I think if each of you guys, and we can start off with you, Fawad, can you just share some early hit some brief case studies and some early successes within that, right? Like you've done some pilots, but beyond that, when you go into production.
Yeah, I can share a few examples. Just back to augmenting and amplifying people. So I think we're using co-pilots now. Started again very small in our lab kind of environment, but then now into our broader engineering organization, and seeing productivity improvements that are 20, 30, and 40% in terms of their output for brand new developers. That's just so exciting for them. And even our more seasoned engineers are finding ways to use it to generate test cases. And think about our scale. We have billions of records or data points. To be able to do that across multiple systems, to age that data in a way that it actually works through the workflow is a very tedious process. And so we're using this technology to do those kinds of things. So very technical, but again, amplifying our employees. And then on the other side, the customer-facing side, if you've had a car accident, and I've been through a terrible one where the car has been totaled, that process can be painful, obviously literally, but also metaphorically. And it can take weeks just because you have to take the car to the shop. There they have to see if they can repair it. Then the answer is no, we can't. Now you have to tow it to the salvage yard. All this cost, all this time, and the customer is waiting for it. So we've actually used data and AI to predict at the notice of loss, when you just share the facts of loss, to determine with incredible levels of accuracy that we should total this car. And instead of 2 or 3 weeks, we've paid a customer inside of 1 hour of them calling, and they said, I think you've made a mistake. I just reported my claim. I said, no, we'd like to send you the money. Where do we send it? And so that's an extreme edge case, but exciting for us to see what the potential is beyond that.
Yes.
So use case for us, or interesting case study, we primarily work with big tech and consumer companies. So people like Duolingo, Eventbrite, or Notion. And we actually work with a big fintech company here in New York. And we just published a case study around this, but basically they're growing really fast. Within 1 month of adopting sort of these AI agents, they're able to stop scaling their support team. And their support team is primarily overseas. And then within 3 months, they were able to reduce it by 25%. And within 6 months, they were able to reduce it by 65%. So they're saving basically like all that is tangible savings, right? Because you're saving a ton of money. And then at the end of the day, you're also raising the customer experience. So like people track, it's called a customer satisfaction score. You want that to be as high as possible. And the score for the AI was actually higher than it was with the human agents. So that use case generally sums up what we're trying to do here.
Nice. Caroline?
Sure. So I'll talk about large enterprise client. Like we primarily, we've historically worked in deploying our technology into the contact centers where there's a large amount of volume going through the contact centers. So that's large enterprises like banks, telcos, cable TV companies. And so our clients, if you look at our client base, they kind of, are made up predominantly of those types of customers. They are using now, if I talked about a use case 10 years ago, it'd be very different to the use cases here today, because we're seeing new channels emerge. So digital channels, as well as having voice agents sitting in the contact center there for them to manage their conversations. So our kind of core and really most valuable use case around at the moment is having and enabling our clients to use all of those channels and resources. I know you're in the resources business, but we look at resources as both human agents and those automated channels and capabilities that you have, and trying to allocate them in a way that drives the most revenue at the lowest possible cost. So for example, a telco, I'll talk about a big telco client in the US here. They have a customer journey where you call into the contact center, you're triaged by a very good natural language sounding voice bot. I will say it's getting better and better over time. It answers, it says, an agent will soon be available to take your call. Is there anything I can help you with while we wait for that agent? They'll try and triage them through some basic things. If there's a complex query, of course, they're going to wait for that human agent. Now, which human agent do they pair to? When do they pair? When do they hand off? And that decision is about trying to drive as much revenue for the business, because remember, these businesses are still trying to retain customers, upsell on products, things like that. So there's a decision there that you've got to make in real time on how to get as much value from your available resources. And you want to do that at the lowest possible cost. And so what we're in there doing is trying to optimize that human escalation point. We try and decide whether or not we pass them on to a voice agent. Do we make them hold, waiting for a better pair? Do we try and push them to an assisted channel like chat, which will be able to answer sooner, which is a lower cost to serve for the business? And so it becomes this real-time optimization that you can do. It becomes really powerful in terms of, in terms of metrics. So you can get anywhere between 5 and 15% improvement on revenue, and you can reduce costs. So the lifetime profitability per call increases.
Oh, excellent. So Jesse, what is something in the labs that you're really excited about that's not out there in public yet?
For sure. So one thing that we're looking into now, which honestly was never possible before AI or the recent generative AI models. And so no one has really invested that much into this. But one interesting thing about the customer experience space is that there's a ton of data, right? It's like all these conversations from your customers. It's very valuable data because it's literally what your customers are saying. So people want to learn as much from it as possible. In the past, the most you could do is basically some level of tagging maybe. So you would tag the conversations, the leadership would be able to come in and kind of see some big trends and stuff like that. But you're not able to really kind of take advantage of all the transcripts you have. And so one big area of research for us, and we call it kind of voice of customer, is like, how can you actually figure out what exactly your customers are saying using these LLM models? And so you can have a generative AI model that reads every single conversation, and using clever ways to structure it, you can basically extract this is something very interesting you should be noticing because it's like this new trend that's emerging, or you had a spike in this sort of case on like last week, and it's because of XYZ. And the goal eventually is that you should be able to ask any open-ended question you have about your customers or your product or what people are saying, and it'll find the data for you, it'll draw the charts for you, it'll kind of break down and do the sort of granular tagging for you. And so I think that's like the other side of this sort of AI for CX space, where you have the AI actually interacting with users, but then on the back end, you can actually use the AI internally as well to analyze the conversations.
Cool. Before we move to the next section, there's a QR code. I know some people have been asking questions, so feel free to ask questions. If your question is already asked, feel free to upvote it, and we'll get to audience questions towards the end. So I'd like to go into the next section of our discussion, is basically challenges in AI adoption, right? There's a lot of, we heard earlier in the keynote that there's a lot of FUD around there. People are just generally hesitant. It's the people side of it, like they're afraid of adopting AI, whether it's hallucinations or whatever. And there are a lot of startups in this room as well, right? And you've certainly been able to navigate through these large companies and been able to sell effectively into them. So would love to sort of get from your perspectives, Caroline, maybe we start with you. Like, what are some of the obstacles that you and your company has been able to sort of overcome as they've gone into these large enterprises, these old school telco companies, insurance companies, et cetera?
Sure. So we've been doing this a while, but I will say that, it was hard then, it's still hard now. I think as well, when we think about the maturity of AI in these organizations, the customer experience and the contact center space for us, but the customer experience in particular, is the most obvious place where enterprises can add value. And so often that's their first couple of use cases. So what that means is that, we've seen over the last probably 2 years, a lot of pilots, and I think the kind of first challenges emerged after that is there. And we heard from our first keynote speaker, a lot of those pilots have failed in a lot of cases in terms of delivering material ROI, right? So this return that's needed to justify the investment in the technology. And so while some have been successful, there have been some that have been failures. And so there's this reticence now. I think there's this thing where you've gone, well, now we can't scale because we haven't been successful. And I will just point out, I think a lot of what we see in terms of failure, and I've observed this now speaking to a lot of clients, I do think a lot of the failure doesn't really come down to the technology itself, but it's actually the way that the pilots are set up. Pilots are effectively an A/B test, an experimental design, and it's amazing how much, you can put so much technical rigor into the AI solution, and yet there are, we see often so little rigor put into the experiment on the other side. And so we see these kind of false positives or false negatives emerge, which is, I think, that data is the most kind of critical around that point. But I think kind of this, lack of ROI, so kind of broader reticence around scaling. I think the risks, this idea that there is some benefit, but there are these risks. And so what we're seeing now as well is you hear risks of hallucination. What that's translated to in the business has been very, I would say, robust AI governance processes now being implemented. Every single one of our enterprise customers now is, as a vendor, is putting us through their own governance process. They're varying in their scope, but and they reflect various different regulations depending on the industry in which they're in and the market in which they're in. But it is a very real thing, and it's a critical checkbox now for any of vendors, partners, or even internal AI teams deploying solutions. They have to go through this process, and I will say it's very, very, very strict, especially in consumer-facing businesses. I think, and data, I will always say, I think data is always a hard problem. But I think those two are, for me, are the kind of standout.
Fawad, if you'd like to add anything from being on the inside, it's like, what are the obstacles you're seeing when enterprises adopting AI?
Yeah, and I could speak to a few themes, I think. So the first is, it's been discussed earlier, I think Aditi brought it up as well, but we're regulated down to a state level. So we've got complexity and variance and what they expect of us and how we should perform. So there's a lot of just navigating and understanding where is Colorado versus Massachusetts, which, by the way, we don't do business in Massachusetts, but thanks for inviting me anyway.
Yeah.
But
I think you're going to start doing business in California, I hear, too. So,
but the complexity of just understanding what they want, and that we can't really deploy something one way. Sometimes we have to vary it else. So that's just one layer. Second, I think Caroline just mentioned data is a huge issue for larger companies. So we have systems that are decades old. There are systems that might be built in the 70s or 80s, like code still running, and we're modernizing all of those. But that's a journey. And so that data resides in different forms, so the opportunity tends to get more narrowed down. That's just the thing that we have to, it's gravity. You can't fight it. You just have to go through the process. And I think last but not least is some mindset issue. And again, I think Aditi talked about the industrial revolution up here. And one of the things I read about electrification is when electricity was first used, it wasn't used inside the factory to power machines. It was first used to just open the gate, so you could go in easily. And so think of that as the mindset around when you talk to large organizations. You're trying to get in there. You're trying to solve a simple problem maybe at first. And the more you can speak about their customers and their customer needs, which is how they operate most of the time, then I think you're going to start to speak their language. And if they do a POC, don't get excited. It's just exactly that. It's a proof of concept. And they have a lot of stakeholders to bring on board alongside. So nothing specific to us, but generally speaking, large-scale companies struggle with similar issues.
Yeah. So I think that's a good weave into my next question. It was going to be, what advice would you have for startups trying to get into large enterprises? And it doesn't have to be State Farm, but you more at an abstraction level. What advice would you have for them?
I would say if you just think about, put yourself in their shoes, again, if you can empathize with what they're doing, first of all, they want to make sure that they can rely on what it is that you have. That means not only protect their brand that they've earned over time, but you can financially stand behind something going wrong, that you can stand behind the product that you're selling. And then more importantly, that it's reliable and resilient at a scale that's that you may not have yet proven. And of course, this time and place, technology is moving so fast that you can scale almost overnight. So I think organizations have to change their mind around how small or large a company needs to be before they do business with it. And again, that's generally speaking, that's the thing that's being changed now, is that approach around, have you existed and how much money do you have in your bank before I sign a contract with you? So I think it goes both ways.
Yeah. Caroline, you're no longer a startup. I mean, been a 10, 14-year journey. What advice would you have for these new emerging startup companies trying to tackle this space and going into enterprises?
So it's, I think go in with something, a strong value prop, obviously. But I think as you're trying to navigate these businesses, both technologically and from a business point of view, I think one kind of tactical piece of advice I would give is go and find your internal sponsor and let them help you articulate that solution value to their business and help drive them through their business. There's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of process. Like I touched on that AI governance process. Just to give you I think about it at a specific example now with a large health insurance client of ours. Their AI governance process is evolving. It went from a 10-page document to an 80-page questionnaire within 2 weeks. And so having that internal sponsor help us address their questions, because their questions are not generic. Their understanding of AI is not generic. They're very specific to their business process. It's in their language. And so having that person be able to help us to address their questions, understand the value, the risks, the risk management that we have in place through that sponsor, through that translation layer is critical. And so that's been something that's featured in all of our sales and deployment processes from the beginning, and it's becoming even more important now.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch to some audience questions here. And I think one of the most popular question here is like, why wouldn't large enterprises develop these AI agents in-house, given the sensitivity of the customer data, proprietary processes? So when we go around.
So the question is why not?
Why not do it in-house? Why buy versus build?
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of both. Generally, from what I'm hearing, I'm connecting with a lot of organizations, even outside of our industry, but it's a bit of both. So we do buy solutions that are working out of the gate, and then we are using open source and our own data and AI talent where it's a bit more proprietary. So if you think about how we do our pricing, again, we have to testify before insurance commissioners to see how that's done. We need to be able to explain that and to be able to operate under those principles around explainable, reliable, and trusted. They interview us on that and go quite deep on that. So those are examples where we actually use these technologies in-house. But if it's not proprietary, if it's not fundamental to what you do as a company, I would always start with why on earth would you spend time building that yourself? And so you should definitely look for the best partner for you within your constraints.
Sorry. Anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, I think it comes down to it's actually quite hard to build it well. I think if you wanted to build like a quick demo where you could chat with something and it would kind of talk about your company, that's pretty easy to do. But we talked to so many businesses that have tried maybe like 12 months to staff engineers on a project, get something up and running, and then you just realize there's just so many edge cases, so much complexity that you have to account for, and then it's like, okay, it's not really worth us spending these engineers on it. You should have them working on the core product. And then they just stop, and you wasted a year and a bunch of money to do the project, and then you look for a vendor. So yeah, I think it just comes down to like if it's a very difficult thing and it's not core to your company and like what you're good at, then it's usually not that worth it to do it in-house. There are some businesses for which it might make sense. So if you I think DoorDash is a good example where they have 70 engineers that are staffed entirely on CX, and so maybe it makes sense for them to do it in-house, but that's very rare.
Yeah, I agree. I think put your AI talent or your engineers and data scientists on, things that give you competitive edge. I think AI agents now are becoming, you've got very high quality AI agents coming out of multiple vendors and partners. They're going to be the best in class. And if your competitor has best in class as an enterprise, you'd be a fool to not incorporate that as well. And then work on the more nuanced, proprietary, differentiated offerings in-house that'll really then allow you to compete against your competitors.
There's a question from the audience for you, Caroline, is you mentioned about rigorous evaluation of AI. Can you please expand on that a little bit, and how do enterprises actually do a rigor test on that?
Sure. Okay, so that's a good question. So this was asked of us in the beginning. It was like our second client. And I've been around with the company for a long time, so I remember this. We said, we're going to add value. We're going to add 3%, 5% to your conversion rate with our AI optimization product. And they said to us, prove it. And, now we kind of talk about pilots and things like that. But back then we were thinking, okay, how do we prove this? And we had a team of data scientists in-house and a group of data scientists specifically on a branch of statistics called causal inference, understanding why something happened. So for the MIT folks in-house, whoever did statistics, this was about trying to understand cause and effect. And so what we were trying to answer with our technology was our technology Afiniti causing the impact that we saw in conversion rate in the queues that we were in which we deployed. And so to do that, we set up a control group. So we turn our technology on again and off again in short cycles. We turn on for 20 minutes, off for 4, on for 20, off for 4. And that control group off is where we can measure our performance against. So on, business metrics, we can measure things like fairness as well. But it's this continual A/B test that allows us to then say, we've added value. And we kind of took that a little bit further, and we also do a pay-per-performance. So we only get paid on the value that we deliver. You're seeing that now with a lot of, let's not say a lot, but a few AI providers in CX like Zendesk that are doing outcomes-based pricing. But it really allows you to answer that question on ROI. But that, importantly, when you're designing that experiment, you need to put a lot of rigor into that design to make sure that it's the least biased representation. And so we use that time-based, called a switchback design. You see it a lot in rideshare and other type of two-sided marketplaces. But it's a really meaty statistical problem. So anyone who's got a few on staff who like thinking about problems like that, this is a perfect accompaniment to your AI technology, is having this kind of A/B testing framework alongside it.
Cool. Thank you. Jesse, there's a question for you. You mentioned the differentiator is that you're not a black box AI. So what have you built to make your solution not a black box AI? This audience is a tough audience here.
Awesome. So in terms the way we approach it, there's two sides of it, right? So if you don't want to be a black box, number one, you have to have very transparent and auditable kind of AI functionality. That means, all right, you have a conversation, the AI generated a response. Like, what are exactly all the steps it took to get that response? So like, which data sources did it pull in? Why did it decide to pull those data sources? So you can have the AI explain itself. What knowledge is it pulling from? And how is it writing its answer, right? So like, one thing you always do nowadays when you're kind of doing these AI answers is you have like what's called a critical review step. And so it's like, all right, you write your answer, and before you send it out, you have to review it with itself to make sure it's checking against all its knowledge, and then you send it out, right? And that step, it kind of explains its own logic as well. So a big piece, the first piece is everything has to be super transparent. If you're an enterprise and you're kind of wondering why something happened, you should always be able to look at the logs and pinpoint what's happening. The second piece of not being a black box is you have to be able to feel like you can control the AI's logic, right? If you're the CX team and it's like, a new feature launched, or we have a new way of doing things, or I'm not super happy with how this conversation went, I want to adjust it. You should be able to do that very quickly. In the old days, what you would have to do is you'd probably have to go into your systems. There's probably a big decision tree somewhere, and you'd have to like track down like what to do, and it becomes a little bit brittle. But nowadays with LLMs, what you can do is you can just give it feedback in natural language. You can just write down what you want it to do. It kind of processes that, updates itself, and that's how you kind of do these quick iteration loops. And if you think about it, that's how humans work too, right? If you have a new agent that joins your team and you need to give him or her feedback, you can just be like, hey, do this next time. And that's how you kind of control and update the logic. So those two pieces are in our mind what's most important to not be a black box.
All right. I'm going to take two rapid questions. So, Fawad, real quick, people are asking, how difficult is it to find AI engineering talent and upskilling your current engineering org?
I think just first of all, it's difficult in general. More importantly, it's difficult to get people to relocate. So what we've done is we've been more flexible with that, and we allow people to work from where they are, but they have to be really tied to their team, and the team lead really has to be intentional about handling that. And then upskilling, we've been having people adopt all of the tools that we're putting out. They're interacting with the generative in-house capability. Tens of thousands of them have now used it. And so we're learning from what they're using it for. So those are two quick examples.
Cool. Rapid fire. We've got 10 seconds left. So very quick. We're entering 2025. What are your predictions in AI and CX in 2025? Caroline.
Edge AI. It's going to be big.
Jesse.
For us, voice. So having fully generative voice agents, we're excited about that.
Fawad?
For me, just the rapid scale is going to keep shocking us at how much it evolves. So just keep reimagining your business.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. This has been very, very informative. We have a session number 2, which is going to be continuing this discussion forward. But can we have a round of applause for this amazing panel?